Okay, well, welcome back. And I promised you today the first abstract economic model, a model that's going to shed a little bit of light on two of the three big questions: the what question, what gets produced in what quantities; and the how question, how do we produce these goods and services. As I said last time, I don't think it has any insight whatsoever for the who question, who gets the good or service, gets the goods or services. But this model that I'm going to talk about today is called the Production Possibilities Frontier, or Production Possibilities Curve. If you've taken other economics classes, you may have heard it referred to as the PPC, Production Possibilities Curve. Same thing, just different names for the same thing. Now, this really applies to an overall economy. But when we're thinking about an overall economy, that's a pretty abstract thing to think about. I personally like to have concrete examples. Concrete examples help me understand abstract concept more easly. And I think that the best concrete example I can do for this production possibility frontier is not to start with an entire economy, but instead is to start with and think about a production possibility frontier for a student. Because, you guys are students, I've been a student, so everybody here has been a student at one point. So we understand, sort of what goes on to be a student. Now, I'm going to simplify this tremendously. Remember, that's what we want to do. We want to simplify stuff to, make understanding the real world easier, understanding the basic forces that drive the real world. We want to understand those. So when we think about a student, and you think about the number of activities a student could do, there are literally thousands of different activities. You could work in all kinds of different areas. You could take different classes. You could eat out more or less often. You could clean your house more or less often, okay, and so on and so forth. But what we're going to do is we're going to start with a very simplified framework of a student who just does two things, two activities, if you will. The student is going to study, and that's going to produce a GPA, and the student is going to socialize, and that's going to produce dates. Now, obviously, people do more than just study, students do more than just study and date. But once we understand what's going on here for these two activities, studying and socializing, we can easily include, a third activity, working, or a fourth activity, commuting, or a fifth activity, sleeping, or a sixth activity, eating, or a seventh activity, or an eighth, or a ninth, or 10th. So we're going to start with just two. Once we have a grasp of this, you'll understand 2,000 different activities. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a diagram right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the students studying up here, and I'll measure that with their GPA. And then I'll measure the students socializing down here, and I'll measure that with the number of dates. Now, for the GPA, obviously, 4.0 is as high as it goes. Then we'd have 2.0, and here is 1.0, and here is 3.0, okay? And then for dating, again, I'm going to simplify the dates. I'm going to say that a date lasts 1 hour. Okay, one date equals 1 hour. I'm not going to worry about the different quality of dates. I'm just saying, one date is 1 hour. So if we think about this in a day, the maximum number of dates you could have in a day would be 24 dates in a day. Or, of course, you could have fewer. You could have 12 dates, or you could have 0 dates, whatever. Now, let's think about a student who's got really well-developed social skills. So this student could, if they choose to do so, date 24 hours a day. Now, if you're dating 24 hours a day, what's your GPA going to be? Well, unless you're taking wildlife issues, your GPA is going to be 0. If you take wildlife issues, it'll be a little bit higher. But if you date 24 hours a day, that means you're spending no time studying, you're not going to class, you're not taking any exams, you're not handing anything in, you have a GPA of 0. So this is a combination of dates and grades that this student could produce. Now, I'm not saying the student is going to, but I'm saying the student could produce this combination of dates and grades. Now, suppose you cut back your dating an hour, so that you only date 23 hours a day. Now, what you've done here is you're spreading yourself free for an hour. There's an hour a day when you're not dating. Now, if you use this hour as efficiently as possible, what would your GPA be? Well, first, what do I mean use it as efficiently as possible? Well, okay, suppose that you have a test, and that test is, say, in this class, and it's running from, I don't know, 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Well, you spring yourself free, so you take the test from 7 to 8 o'clock. All right, you don't date from 7 to 8 o'clock and then spring yourself free from 10 to 11. Okay, that you're going to be, making sure that you are not dating during the hour of the exam. Or you don't have an exam, but you've got class. And what you do is you say, well, if I attend class, I learn more. So I'm going to attend class for an hour. You don't say, well, I'm going to date during class and I will spend an hour studying some other time, because that's not as efficient. You know you do better if you come to class. Or it's the weekend and you've still got yourself a free hour and you know that you study best in the early afternoon. Well, you take an hour off from dating in the early afternoon to study. So you're using your time as efficiently as possible. And let's say in this case, your GPA might be, 0.8. So that would be a second combination of dates and grades that you could produce. Or, you could have 22 dates. And now you're springing yourself free for 2 hours a day. Again, use these 2 hours a day as efficiently as possible, and your GPA might be 1.4. Okay, so that would be a third combination. Or we look at 21 dates, and we can look at 20, and I'm going to end up with a whole bunch of points up here. And then coming here, let's suppose that even if you date 0, your study skills are such that the maximum GPA you can achieve is a 3.7. So, okay, so I'll have 25 different points here. But when you think about it, there's no particular reason why we have to restrict ourselves, say, to integer number of dates. You could think about 23 and a half dates a day. And by 23 and a half dates a day, I don't mean that you go out on a date, you discover you're with the director, and so you excuse yourself after a half hour, so you've got to go to the restroom and you crawl out the window. I'm sure that's happened to you, right, director?
I'm still waiting for my last date to come back from the bathroom.
They'll be back, don't worry. Yeah, don't worry. So, but no, that's not what I mean. What I mean for 23, though it could be, right? For 23 and a half dates, what I mean is, one day you date 23, the next day you date 24, so that averages 23 and a half. And that would give you a point right here. Or you could have 23 and a third dates. One day you date 24, 2 days you date 23, that's 23 and a third dates right here. And you can keep on doing this, and eventually you're going to track out this solid line here. And that solid line there, that's our production possibilities frontier, or the PPF. And what this PPF shows us is it shows us a difference between dates that we can attain and dates that we cannot attain. It shows us something else also. But let's just first of all look at the difference between the attainable combination, I meant dates and grades that we can attain, and dates and grades that we can't attain. So any combination of dates and grades that lies beyond the frontier, that combination right there, that combination is simply not attainable. You don't have the social skills, you don't have the study skills right now to reach that combination of dates and grades. You may really, really want to, but you can't do it. You cannot produce that combination of dates and grades. Points on the frontier, this point right here, that point is attainable. If you choose it, you could reach that combination of dates and grades. So too, however, are points within the frontier. This point within the frontier is also attainable. So points beyond the frontier are not attainable. Points on the frontier and within the frontier are attainable. But there's a vast difference between the point on the frontier and the point within the frontier. Remember, how did I say that we were getting these points here? I said that you're using your time, your resources, your skills as efficiently as possible. So these points on the frontier, these points are called production efficient points. Points within the frontier, those you get to by being inefficient. As I suggested, you've got a test, let's say it's a different class, it's from 3 to 4 p.m., and instead of taking the test, you date from 3 to 4 p.m. That's not an efficient use of your time. So that you get to these points down here by being inefficient. These points are said to be production inefficient. So that says that we've got 3 different types of points. We've got the points we can attain right here and the points that are not attainable out here. And then from the attainable points, we have the production efficient points and the production inefficient points. Now sometimes I get asked, what about the points beyond the frontier? Are those production efficient or are they production inefficient? And the answer is, well, they're not really either because you can't produce them. Okay, these you can produce. So that's why they're production, they're producible, and they're either efficient or they're inefficient. So this is showing us, if you will, the limits to the dates and grades that this person can produce, the limits to what they can do. Now, we can think about this and we can think, okay, suppose something changes here. Suppose, for example, the person gains some skills as they spend more time in college. And in particular, suppose they gain some study skills. Well, okay, let's think about that. Let's come over here. And let's look here. And let's suppose, okay, here's the GPA. Here is the dates right here. And let's look at somebody whose initial production possibility frontier might look like this. So here's their PPF as a freshman. So as time progresses, they gain more social skills. As time progresses, they gain more study skills. So this is their PPF as a freshman. This might be their PPF as a senior. So what has gone on, as they've gained more of these skills, their PPF has shifted outward. And combinations of dates and grades that were not at all attainable as a freshman, let's say this combination of dates and grades, that combination was clearly way beyond the PPF as a freshman. Well, as a senior, they can reach that combination of dates and grades. So that the PPF will change, can shift as we see here, if their study skills improve, if their social skills improve. Now, I shifted this in kind of a parallel fashion. Okay, curvy lines, it's hard to think of curvy lines as being parallel. There's no necessity that it shifts in a parallel fashion. Let me come over here. Here will be a PPF right here. This will be dates. And GPA up here. Suppose that it's their study skills that increase a lot and their social skills increase only a little. You might get a shift like this. So there's no necessity for the PPF to shift outward in sort of a parallel fashion. But if their skills increase, it's going to shift outward. Now, let's come back and think about just the PPF itself. And let me come over here, because I've got a lot of stuff on the first PPF. Let's come over here and draw another one. So here is my dates. Here is my GPA. Here is the PPF. This point is attainable. The point on the PPF is attainable. This point is also attainable. Now, suppose from this point right here, and actually let me move this one down the axis a little bit here. So here is 1, 2, 3, 4 like this. So right here, your GPA is 1.8 and your dates are, let's say this is 19 dates. You look at this, And you say, well, I'm not as satisfied as I could be because I'm sort of like a submarine. And in what sense are you like a submarine? Well, your GPA is below sea level. Get it? Director, did you get that?
Unfortunately so.
Yeah, get it? Pretty funny, right, Director?
It's something.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Okay, so the director says, this is hilariously funny. So
This is hilariously funny.
Hilariously funny. The deal is that you can change. If you want to increase your GPA, you can do so. You can move up along the production possibility frontier. And you can go from this point right here, move up along the PPF, and come here. And you could have a GPA of, let's say, 2.6. But look what happens here. Your dates over here are going to fall. That if you want, you can increase your GPA, but as you increase your GPA, your dates decrease. Okay? Or, I mean, conversely, you could start at a point up here. Here's your GPA right here. Let's say your GPA is 3.6 and your dates are 2. And you say, I'd like more dates. Well, again, you can change. If you want, you can change. You can increase the number of dates. You can come down the PPF here. And you can increase the number of dates from 2 to, I don't know, 6. But look what happens to your GPA. It's going to fall. So that if you want to increase your dates, that's certainly possible. As your dates go up, however, your GPA goes down. And what this trade-off here reflects is something called opportunity cost. Okay, opportunity cost is a really important economic concept. The opportunity cost of an action is the, I'm going to underline, the next best alternative foregone. In other words, when you think about taking an action, that almost always means that you're going to be losing something. Right here, it's really easy to see what the opportunity cost is. If you increase your GPA, you're going to be losing dates. That's the opportunity cost of increasing your GPA. If you increase your dates, you're going to be losing GPA. That's the opportunity cost of increasing your dates. So the opportunity cost is the true cost of an action. So let's see. Right now, it is 10:30, and I'm already thinking about what do I want to have for lunch. And let's suppose I could have, let me put some alternatives up here. I could go down to McDonald's. I could get a Big Mac. And I think that they're a little bit under $6, but I'll say, suppose that's $6. Or I could go over to Chipotle and I could get a burrito, and that's B, Director. Burrito got 2 R's, 2 T's, 1 R, 2 T's?
Two
R's?
2 R's, 1 T.
2 R's?
B-U-R-R-I-T-O.
R-R-I-T-O. That looks okay. That looks reasonable. I could get a burrito for $6. Or I could go over to Paisano's. I could get a pizza, a small pizza over there. Let's say that's also $6. I think these are probably higher, but let's say it's all $6. And suppose I order it this way. Okay, I feel like today this would be my number 1 choice, this would be my number 2 choice, and this would be my number 3 choice. So what am I going to do? Well, for lunch, I'm obviously going to go to Paisano's. That's my first choice. I'll buy the pizza. I'll spend $6 on it. So what is buying that pizza? What does that really cost me? It's not the $6 it's cost me. What it's cost me, what I'm giving up, is I'm giving up the fact that I can't use that $6 to buy the Big Mac. That's the opportunity cost of buying the pizza, the fact that I can no longer buy the Big Mac. It's not the Big Mac and the burrito, because I can't use the $6 to buy them both. I can only use the $6 to buy just the Big Mac up here. So the opportunity cost of buying the pizza is the Big Mac. As I said, almost every action you can think of has an opportunity cost. Just watching this class. If you weren't watching this class, think what you would be doing, okay? If you weren't watching this class, you might be napping. Or if you weren't watching this class, you might be working outside. Or if you weren't watching this class, you might be watching TV. Or if you weren't watching this class, you might be with friends. Whatever you would be doing if you were not watching this class, that is the opportunity cost of watching the class. Now, look, that opportunity cost is oftentimes really hard to see what it is. I can't look at somebody and say, well, if they weren't watching the class, they'd be hanging out with friends. I don't know that. They might be hanging out with friends. On the other hand, they might be doing laundry, for God's sake. I don't know. But that opportunity cost exists in the same way here. It's hard for you, impossible for you to look at and say, well, okay, Rush bought pizza today. What was the opportunity cost? Because you don't know how I rank other choices here. But the point of the matter is that opportunity cost exists. Here, the opportunity cost is really very easy to measure because we only have two things. We just have GPA and days. And when you move along the PPF, there's always an opportunity cost. If you increase one, you've got to decrease the other. Let's, however, look right here at this production inefficient point right here. At this production inefficient point right here, if you choose, you could change and you can move to the PPF and you could have more dates and a higher GPA. That there'd be no opportunity cost here of going, that we could see in the diagram, of going to the PPF. Now, you might say, well, that means that these points are really very desirable because there's no opportunity cost of changing, and that's entirely wrong. Look, think about it this way. You take a test. On the test, you get 100%, or on a test, you get 45%. 100% you can't change, right? Okay, there's no way you can change it. 45% you can change. Oh, wow, that makes the 45% a lot more desirable. God, I wish I got a 45% because I could change that. I could increase that. Nobody says that. That's ridiculous, right? You'd rather have the 100% than the 45%. The 45% is inferior. The 100% is the best you can do. So too here. Okay, this is the 45%. If you come out here to the PPF, you've got more of everything. So these points along the PPF are much more desirable than these points within the PPF. So this is looking at a PPF for a student. And notice, it has shed some light on the what question and the how question. Okay, that it's showing us that with the what question, what GPA and number of dates is the student going to produce? Well, there are limits to what you can answer that. That any combination that lies beyond it, like you say, well, this person's going to produce that combination, that answer is not viable because you can't get there. That point's not attainable. So your answer to the what question has to be points on or within the PPF. And then the how do you produce them? Well, the points on the PPF are definitely more desirable than the points within the PPF. When I compare this point to that point, I've got more dates and more GPA. If I've got more dates and more GPA, I'm clearly better off. So points along the PPF are likely the most desirable points. So how do you want to produce? This is probably, you probably would have guessed this, but you want to be efficient about how you produce stuff. You don't want to waste your resources. You don't want to be stupid about how you're producing things. So this is looking at a PPF just for a student who's just doing two things. Now, if we thought about the student who also worked, Well, in theory, I could draw a three-dimensional PPF, in theory. In practice, there's no way I'm drawing a three-dimensional PPF. But you'd have that three-dimensional PPF, and you'd still have that production possibility frontier. Notice I'm shaping it in three-dimensional space here, and that says that you can't produce beyond the PPF. Same lesson we saw here with just the EZ2. And if you're on the PPF, and you change and you increase one activity, you've got to give something else up. You either give up more of a second or more of a second and a third, okay? There's opportunity costs when you move along the PPF. Points within the PPF, those are going to be inefficient points, and from the point within the PPF, you can change and you can get more of everything that you're doing. Okay, so you can say that with 3 or with 4. With 4, you can't draw it. With 4, you just have to use math, or 5 or 100, whatever. But again, the same points carry over. There is a limit to what you can do. It doesn't matter how many activities we're thinking of, but you are limited. If you do more of one activity and you're being efficient, you've got to do less of others or other activities. Okay, and that if you are being inefficient, you can change and you can have more of everything if you chose. So that's a PPF for a student. But as I said, the PPF is really best meant for an economy. If I want to study people's behavior, this PPF is not the best way to do it. There are better models to use. But I think, understanding for a student now is going to help us when we think about understanding it for an economy. So let me get rid of this and let me now start thinking about an overall economy. And again, I'm going to have a very simple economy. This very simple economy is just going to, once again, produce only 2 things. As long as it produces just 2 things, I can draw it up here on the board. And then once we understand what goes on when it produces 2 things, we can easily understand what happens if it produces 3 things or 33 things or 330 things. So what we're going to do is we're going to have an economy that is going to be producing machines and gumballs. And you may wonder about, why am I choosing machines and gumballs? It turns out there's a hilarious joke I have here. And we won't see it this hour. It'll probably come up next hour. But it's just this hilarious joke. And before I started teaching here at Florida, I was teaching at the University of Pittsburgh. And this was the first joke I came up with in class. And I told it to the class, and nobody laughed. And I thought, this is odd. I've got a class of people with no senses of humor. And then I told the second semester, and again, nobody laughed. I go, this joke is really funny, but I found a way to make the joke funny. All right, and the way I'm making the joke funny is I'm going to remind you that I write the exams for the class. I write all the exams for the class. If I'm in a good mood, I'll probably write an easier exam. If I like the class, it'll probably be an easier exam. If I'm in a bad mood, if I don't like the class, it's probably going to be a more difficult exam. Now, what's it take for me to like a class or dislike a class? Oh, pretty much laughing at my jokes, okay? If you laugh at my jokes, I'm happy. If you don't laugh at my jokes, I'm less happy. So I will simply point out to you that, when we see each other face to face the first time, if you come up and you say, hey, I thought your joke was absolutely hilarious, I fell out of the chair laughing, I'm going to be happier with the class, okay? So just keep that in mind, all right? You may choose not to laugh, you may stifle your laughter, but you probably ought to tell me that you found it funny. So, Director, does that seem clear enough to you?
Crystal clear.
Crystal clear, okay. So let's look here. I'm going to have a table, and the table is going to have 4 columns. On the 4th column is going to be a wider column, so leave yourself some space for the 4th column. So the first, we'll just note down the production possibility, and then we'll have the number of machines this economy is producing. And then over here, we'll have the number of gumballs. And remember, there's a 4th column over here. So production possibility A Suppose that this economy uses all of its resources, all of its technology, everything it has to produce machines. It'll produce 10 machines and 0 gumballs. So all of the resources, I'll talk about that in a moment, are devoted to producing machines, and none of them are devoted to producing gumballs. That's possibility A. Possibility B would be it could produce 9 machines and it could produce 1 gumball. So let's move some resources out of the machine sector into the gumball sector. So we're now producing 1 gumball. Possibility C would be, say, 7 machines and 2 gumballs. Possibility D would be 4 machines and 3 gumballs. And possibility E would be 0 machines, and then we would produce 4 gumballs. So look, I think it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. I made these numbers up, all right? But here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 production possibility points. And let me come over here, and let me actually be fairly careful about plotting those. Now, it really doesn't matter which goes on which axis, but let me plot gumballs down here along the horizontal axis, and I'll plot machines up here along the vertical axis. So for gumballs, I've got 0, I've got 1, I've got 2, I've got 3, I've got 4. And for machines, 10, okay, 5. Okay, so production point A is 10 machines and 0 gumballs. So here's production point A right here. If you want to label it, that's a good idea, but label it out here, because I'll be using this area right in here to put other stuff. So there's production point A. Okay, for B, that is 1 gumball here and 9 machines. And it looks like 9 might be about there. So it looks like here would be B. And again, label B out around there. Production point C was 2 gumballs and 7 machines. And let's see, I think that's swayed over a little bit. So we'll come up here. So that looks like it's about point C. D was what? 4 machines. So there's 4, here's 7. 4 machines and 3 gumballs. So that looks like it's about D. And then E was 4 gumballs and no machines. So there's E. So there are my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. But again, there's no reason to think about just integer numbers of gumballs or machines. I mean, I could have 3.5 gumballs. One day I produce 4, the next day I produce 3. That's 3.5. That gives me a point right here, and so on and so forth. So eventually I'm going to trace out this curve here. And that curve right there, that is, of course, our PPF. And this production possibility frontier for this entire economy, which is clearly a much more abstract concept than thinking about just one student, but the PPF works in exactly the same way as it did when we were just thinking about the one student. Any combination of machines and gumballs that lies beyond the PPF, this combination right here, that combination is not attainable. The economy simply cannot produce that combination of machines and gumballs. At least it can't do it right now. Okay, points on the frontier, this point right here on the frontier, this point is attainable. And that point is also production efficient. So points on the frontier are attainable and production efficient, just as before. Points, well, that didn't help much. I'm going to make that E look like an E. There. Points within the frontier, this point right here, this point is also attainable. But the points within the frontier, those points are production inefficient. Okay, So the PPF is effectively showing us the limits to how much we can produce. The PPF is showing us that we can't produce any combination of machines and gumballs that lies beyond the PPF. Those combinations that lie beyond the PPF, those combinations are simply not attainable. So what limits the amount that we can produce, okay? What are the factors that limit how much this economy can produce? Well, we can divide them into two groups. The amount that you can produce depends on the resources that you possess, and it depends on your technology. So when I think about resources, economists generally divide resources up into four relatively broad categories. Okay, the first category of resources would be labor. And this includes all of the work effort that people do, all of the skills that people bring to bear. So I'm not going to distinguish between a brain surgeon and somebody, flipping burgers at McDonald's, as the example I used last time. That's all labor, okay? That this is work that people are doing. That is the first really broad category of resources. Next category of resources is going to be capital. And when I say capital right here, I mean the actual physical capital. I don't mean money. I don't mean that, oh yeah, somebody has $1 million of capital, that they've invested in the business. It's not, this isn't shares of stock where you own a business. No, this is the actual physical capital. This would be the machine tool that the business owns, or this would be the assembly line that the business owns. This would be the industrial robot that the business owns. So it's the actual physical capital that is owned by the business. The oven that Paisanos owns, that's a piece of capital equipment. So that would be part of the nation's capital stock. Now notice again, I'm not distinguishing between an industrial robot and an oven. I'm just saying, capital is this really broad resource here. Okay, the fourth is land. And by land, you may well be thinking of, okay, farms and forests and such as that. And yeah, that's definitely part of land. But by land, this is what we mean by land. This is all the natural resources, all the, quote, gifts of nature. So it would include fertile farmland, but it would also include, say, a river that you could erect a dam on, or it would include wind, that you could generate wind through wind power. It includes oil, it includes iron ore, okay? Those are all counted as land. They're all natural resources. So once again, I'm not distinguishing between a tree and a ton of iron, all right? Those are both land. They're both considered a natural resource, so they fall under this land category. The last category is one that you may not have seen coming. This is entrepreneurship. Damn it. You can tell I'm a terrible speller. And entrepreneurship is one of those words that if I start and don't stop in the middle, I can spell. But you saw I stopped right here, and then I had to turn around and look to see how you spell it. I also don't want to distract myself. If I'm writing out entrepreneurship, I'm not talking. When I was writing out land, I was talking, or labor, I could talk, but not entrepreneurship. That word, finally got it spelled right up there at least. So entrepreneurship, these are the people that manage and run the businesses. They may be the people that found the business. They may also be the people that are just hired to manage, to run the business. The entrepreneurs make the business decisions about what they're going to produce, how they're going to produce, and what price they're going to charge. So these are the people that organize the other resources to produce the products that are being produced. So here are our four broad categories of resources. And by technology, I'm an economist, when I think about technology, what I think of technology is basically, if you will, a recipe. It's a recipe that tells me how I combine these resources in order to produce a particular unit of output, a particular product. So technology would say, okay, you use this many workers who do this, you use that many workers who do that, you have this capital equipment here, and you have this other type of capital equipment here, and you have this third type of capital equipment here, and you take this natural resource and you take this land, okay, this natural resource, you put in this capital equipment, the worker does this, and then you move it over here and you do that, and then here's your product, you have your output. So that this is fundamentally just a recipe telling us how we can produce stuff. So this is what limits how much we can produce. How many resources does the economy possess? What is the economy's technology? What are the recipes that we know how to use to produce stuff? So the PPF right here shows us the maximum combinations, in this case, of machines and gumballs that can be produced based on the resources that the economy possesses and based on the technology the economy has. And I've got another one right here. And look, I made all of these PowerPoints myself, but I'm a little embarrassed. Okay, that you can see this is a PowerPoint between DVDs and pizza. Look, when I made these PowerPoints, DVDs were high tech, all right? Which says how old this particular PowerPoint is. I've got to change this. And, you know, I said, I'm gonna show students that I really, you know, I'm current and know things. I'm gonna put DVDs down here because this is brand new stuff. And I'll put pizza down here, and the brand new stuff is now defunct. All right, I can't imagine anybody buying a DVD now. So I'll probably change this to tacos. Okay, I don't think tacos will ever go defunct. But same thing, I could draw the PPF right here for those I've got there. Now, I want you to remember something we talked about with the other PPF when we talked about with student. And with a student, I talk about opportunity cost. And the same lessons over here apply also for this PPF for the entire economy. That if you are on the PPF and if you change, if you say are at point C and you decide, well, I'd like more gumballs, you can change, you can move down here, you can move down to point D and you can have more gumballs. But if you produce more gumballs, you're giving up machines. That's the opportunity cost of getting more gumballs. Or if you're at point C and you say, I'd like more machines, you could move up along the PPF. You can produce more machines, but you're giving up gumballs. So there's an opportunity cost when you move along the PPF. And if you're in the interior of the PPF, again, you can change and there's no opportunity cost. You can have more machines and more gumballs. That means these points are less desirable. The points on the PPF where you have more of everything, those are more desirable. Well, now I can actually calculate out what the PPF, what the opportunity cost is moving along the PPF. I know, director.
Yes.
I hate to ask this, but it looks like I'm going to get to where my joke is, okay?
Uh-oh.
So let's see, if you don't mind looking on YouTube, okay, for that YouTube thing?
Yes.
Okay, we'll see if I get to it. And I really hate to do this to you because I may not get to it, all right? But if I do get to it, I want the students to see that because that way they'll know exactly how hilarious this joke is.
If you make me do a bunch of unnecessary work, I'll never forgive you.
Okay, I can live with that. Okay, this last column right here, let's look at the opportunity cost of a gumball. Now, first of all, how do I calculate out the opportunity cost? Well, when you move along the PPF, let me come over here and write this down for us. Okay, moving along the PPF, the opportunity cost, to calculate the opportunity cost, we take what you lose and divide it by what you gain. That's going to be the opportunity cost. Take what you lose, divided by what you gain. So let me come over here. Let me show you. Going from A to B here, what are we going to lose? Well, going from A to B, we're going to lose one machine. What am I going to gain? Well, going from A to B, I'm going to gain one gumball. So I take what I lose one machine, I divide it by what I gain one gumball, and so the opportunity cost here is one machine per gumball. That gumball has cost me one machine. That's what I've had to give up to get that gumball. Let's go from B to C. Okay, when I go from B to C, well, what am I losing? Well, I'm going from 9 to 7 machines. What am I gaining? I'm going from 1 to 2 gumballs. So I take what I lose, and I'm losing 2 machines, divided by what I gain. I'm gaining 1 gumball. So my opportunity cost of that gumball is 2 machines per gumball. That gumball has cost me 2 machines. Let's go from C to D. Okay, from C to D, I'm going from 7 to 4 machines. So what am I losing? I'm losing 3 machines. I'm going from 2 to 3 gumballs. What am I gaining? I'm gaining 1 gumball. So here the opportunity cost is equal to 3 machines per gumball. And as you go from D to E, look, you're going from 4 to 0, you're losing 4 machines. You're going from 3 to 4, you're gaining 1 gumball. So you're losing 4 machines. You're gaining 1 gumball. And this is 4 machines per gumball. Now, we can see that the opportunity cost changes as we move along the PPF. And in particular, as we produce more and more and more and more gumballs, the opportunity cost of each gumball, each additional gumball, is increasing. First gumball costs us 1 machine. Second gumball costs us 2 machines. Third gumball costs us 3, and the fourth gumball costs us 4 machines. Okay, why am I doing that? Well, I'll talk about that in a moment, but let me first of all tell you that when I made these production numbers up, I made these numbers up also. And this is because I wanted the PPF to show us what's called the law of increasing opportunity cost. This law of increasing opportunity cost says that as you move along a PPF, moving along a PPF, as the production of one product increases, its opportunity cost increases. Okay, now, why did I want to show this law of increasing opportunity costs? Why do I want to show this increasing opportunity costs at all? Well, this is actually where my joke comes into play, okay? That this is what we would expect to see when we have a PPF. Because let's think about this. How are we going to increase our production of gumballs? Well, we're going to increase our production of gumballs by what? As we go from A to B, that means we've got to take resources. We've got to take labor. we got to take capital, we got to take land, we got to take entrepreneurs out of the machine sector and put them into the gumball sector. Okay, and so let me just concentrate on labor, on workers, so that as I go from here to here, I've got to take workers out of the machine sector and put them to work making gumballs. Now, director.
Yes.
Did you manage to find that video?
I did indeed.
Could you play it so we can see it and I can see it?
Give me just one moment.
Okay.
Love to chew juicy fruit, 'cause we love that juicy flavor. Juicy fruit's the flavor lover's gum. It's one of a kind, with a flavor bright as sunshine. Juicy fruit's the flavor lover's gum.
Love that luscious burst of flavor in every pack we pick.
In every sweet taste and fascinating stick. Come on, chew juicy fruit, and you'll love that juicy flavor. Juicy fruit's the flavor lover's gum.
Every time I see that commercial, it brings back just bad memories. That commercial was being aired. It seemed like every time you had a commercial break in a show, you would see that commercial for weeks and months and years. That was the most obnoxious commercial I could think of. The only bright spot to me is I don't think any of the people dancing around that tree singing about the joys of juicy fruit, I don't think any of them ever went on to do anything important in the movies. I don't think anybody ever won an Academy Award out of that group, for example. But I guess the other thing to think about is probably for most of them, that was the high point of their life. Okay, no. So director, what did you think of that commercial?
It's the same as always. I ponder and wonder at how commercials have come so far.
Yeah, that was, so anyway, as we're going from here to here, we're moving workers out of the machine sector into the gumball sector. So now what workers are we going to move first? Well, we're going to move workers who are just bad at making machines and great at making gumballs, right? That's what makes sense. Take the people who are really lousy at machines and great at gumballs, move them first, because that way you don't have to move as many people. And plus which they're great at gumballs, again, you don't have to move as many people. So to get this one gumball, you're not moving very many people, and that means you don't lose many machines, plus which they're lousy at machines anyway. So now, as we go from B to C, what are we doing? Well, as we go from B to C, once again, we are moving workers out of the gumball out of the machine sector into the gumball sector. So who are we going to move? Well, we've already moved the workers who are terrible at machines and great at gumballs. So now we've got to move workers who are just bad. They're not terrible, they're just bad at machines. And they're not great at gumballs, they're just good at gumballs. So because they're just good, we've got to move more of them to get another gumball. And that's going to cost us more machines. And then as we move them, well, they weren't terrible at machines, they're just bad at machines. So the opportunity cost is going to be higher. We're having to move more workers who are not as bad at making machines. So the opportunity cost is higher. As we go from C to D, okay, here, as we produce this third gumball, who are we moving? Well, okay, we've moved the workers who are terrible, bad at machines. Now we're having to move workers who are good at machines. And we move the workers who are great, good. Now these workers are bad at gumballs. So the opportunity cost of this third gumball is going to be still higher because we're having to move more workers to get the gumballs because these workers are not real suited for making gumballs, so we have to move more of them. Plus, they were good at making machines. So we have a double whammy. We're losing more machines. Okay, and then as we go from D to E, okay, what are we moving now? Well, we've already moved the workers who are great at gumballs, good at gumballs, bad at gumballs. What do we have left? We have workers that are so bad, get ready to laugh here, okay? These workers are so bad, they're so terrible, they would fall out of the juicy fruit tree. Okay, I'm pausing so you can laugh. Director, you're laughing, right?
Uproariously and without end.
Yes. So, that's my joke. Okay, I find it hilariously funny still. But, people's preferences differ. But the deal here is that, again, the opportunity cost is going to be increasing. This is why we expect this law of increasing opportunity costs. It's because resources are not equally well suited for different productions. That you have some resources that are really, really very good at making machines and poor at making gumballs, other resources that are very good at making gumballs and not great at making machines. So because of the fact that resources differ, that's why we get this increasing opportunity cost. As we make more and more and more of a product, we're having to bring into play resources that are not as well suited to making it, resources that are better suited at making other products. And so the opportunity cost is going to increase. And as a matter of fact, it is that law of increasing opportunity cost that accounts for the bowed out shape of the PPF. Look here, as we go from A to B, I'm going from 0 to 1 gumball. So here's what I gain. I gain +1 gumball. I'm going to lose what? I'm going from 10 to 9 machines. So I'm losing, -1 machine. So that's what I lose there. So I go over here, I drop that. I drop down 1 machine. Now as I go from B to C, look, I'm gaining again. The horizontal gain is the same. I'm gaining 1 gumball. Okay, that gain and that is the same. But now I'm dropping down 2 machines. So I'm dropping more. The slope is getting steeper here. As I go from C to D, again, I am gaining the same thing. My horizontal gain is the same, 1 gumball, but now I'm dropping down 3 machines. So again, the slope is still steeper, and as I go from D to E, the horizontal is the +1 gumball, and the vertical drop now is -4 machines. So as I move from A to B to C to D to E, each movement, the horizontal change is the same, but the vertical drop gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and that makes this PPF bowed outward. Anytime the PPF is bowed outward, we have increasing opportunity cost. Anytime we have increasing opportunity cost, the PPF is bowed outward. So that explains why I was drawing the PPF bowed outward for the student. I was assuming that there's also increasing opportunity costs, that there is some time where the student is really, really great at studying, and then there's other time where the student is just okay at studying, then there's time when their student is, can study but doesn't gain very much from studying at this time. So too for dating, So we have this increasing opportunity cost creating the bowed out PPF. So this is actually a good spot to stop because I can show you a couple more things about the PPF. I can show you also how this PPF reflects back into the 2 big economic questions, but let's do that next time. So if you're reading ahead, and I hope you are, and I'm not quite sure how you'll be watching these lectures, if you have time between this lecture and the next to read ahead, read Chapter 3. Read all of Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is the single most important chapter in the book. It's going to talk about supply and demand. Supply and demand is a topic that's going to be on all of the exams. It's going to be on midterm 1, it's going to be on midterm 2, it's going to be on the final exam. All right, it's the only thing that's going to be on all 3 of the exams. And why is it? Because it is the most important topic in the book. All right. And sometimes I get asked the question, why is the most important topic the 3rd chapter? Why isn't it like the last chapter? I'm saying it's just the way it is. It's important because it's so foundational and it helps us understand so much of the real world. So when we come back to the next lecture, we're going to finish up Chapter 2. We'll do that pretty quickly. We won't finish up Chapter 3, but we'll get a large chunk under our belt of Chapter 3 next time. So with that, Director, do you have any comments, any questions, any suggestions?
Another magnificent teaching job well done.
You really want me to buy you lunch, don't you?
It never hurts.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. Okay, well, that's it then.